Welcome to your Freak to Genius channel. I'm Chris and I'm here to help you transform and grow and to alchemize the lead in your life into gold with joy, ease, and fun, because you're here to live the life you love. I don't have a fixed schedule because I allow things to drop in when they are ready with divine timing. So I invite you to subscribe if you want to be informed when new clips land. But now let's dive into today's episode and create some magic together. Welcome back to another episode and some Freak to Genius insights. I had originally planned on showing you a technique today of how to integrate heavy emotions that are yours to integrate. I announced that in the last video, but while preparing this one, I realized that it would be a good idea to retract a little bit and to give a bit of a background on our unconscious patterns before we make them a conscious process, so your mind can kind of follow along and has a foundation. So that's what we're looking at today. Even if you are someone who is generally in high vibe and a joyful, happy person, you will nonetheless obviously be confronted with things in your life that bring you down, and that can be something that happens to you personally, but it can also be that someone else experiences something that affects you. In the last episode, I shared on how to release the things that aren't yours, but just because they happen to someone else does not mean that they cannot or should not at all affect you. That is absolutely okay when they do, and my aim here is not to turn you into a non-feeling block of ice. You just don't have to resolve the cause of the problems in others, and you can release what isn't yours. But if you still feel that heaviness after releasing what isn't yours, then maybe it is yours to feel, to process, and to integrate. And it's a good thing because we get to feel everything, the whole range of emotions. After all, we're here for the whole ride, like it or not. And I like to compare this to a piano keyboard and imagine how Bach's Prelude No. 1 would sound without the black semitones. Not half as good, right? No, we're here for the whole symphony. But what are those keys on the keyboard? What are emotions? I don't really know who originally came up with this, but it's quite brilliantly described as energy and motion. Emotions are energy and motion, and that's what really happens. Energy that wants to move through our bodies. And if we would allow it, our body would actually perfectly know what to do with it. But chances are that you were taught that it's not okay to feel, and even less okay to express emotions that we call negative, such as anger and frustration, or even grief. People used to be allowed to, and even expected to actually, to grieve for a whole year, if you remember that, and to pass all those firsts without the beloved person and to receive support throughout the whole year. But now you're expected to get back to your productive, happy self in no time, and back to work, back to your routine, and just, function again. And I think the reason behind that is that most of us don't know how to hold space for other people moving through challenging emotions. We don't know how to handle that tension and to be with that. I myself, I used to be a massive hugger, for example. I love to hug the pain away in others. And there's nothing wrong with hugging, obviously, but be conscious of, or I became very conscious of when I do that or when I have the impulse to do that in order to feel better myself, because I cannot hold that tension. I do not trust them to be able to do that by themselves. But I will get into that, and I think what is now the 5th episode if nothing happens in between. But back to the emotions within us. What happens to this energy of the emotions that you're not supposed to feel? Because if you remember, as Einstein said, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So what happens with it? If we don't allow ourselves to feel or express it, One option is to simply push it to the side and put on the happy mask. And that's actually a super common strategy, as this can work really well. You kind of, you still fit in even though you feel all these things. And as a recovering people pleaser, I'm speaking of my own experiences here. But the problem with this is that our marvelous bodies actually keep the score. And this may be a big new concept for you, but I invite you to stay open to that thought, that our bodies tuck away the emotional energy in a safe space until we are able to integrate it. It's actually truly genius, because it doesn't just tuck it away in a place, but it gets neatly sorted. And Louise Hay found a pattern to this energy storage. And in her book, Heal Your Life, she linked knee pain, for example, I think, to the inability to flow with life and to bend, and to stubbornness and not giving in. So the more experiences you have where you get frustrated about life and stubbornly insist on my way or the highway and just push those emotions to the side, the chances are that you may end up with knee problems, according to Louise Hay. And in addition, because your intelligent body wants you to become aware of this storage of energy that it created for you, you actually attract more and more experiences like this to make you wake up to the pattern and to that energy that wants to be used in a much better way than to be stored like that. So genius, right? and yet it can really get to us. Not fun. I want to add that this is obviously not the only possible cause of knee pain, but in my experience, it's one of them. So if you have a constant pain somewhere, there are most likely emotions attached to it. And it can also be inherited, obviously, or picked up from others and other things, other causes. But the source, to me, actually doesn't really matter. What matters is that there is energy and that it can be moved and it can be integrated. And another option that many love is to really dive into what they feel, to expand that emotion by feeding it with tons of thoughts. In the book I'm writing at the moment, Saima, I compare it to feeding cookies to the emotions and to making them stay like that. And this is where emotions actually turn into feelings, although those two terms are often used interchangeably. Feelings are something very different than emotions. Emotions are like the raw data, and feelings are the labels that we give to these emotions. And even though emotions and physical sensations may be the same, people will experience profoundly different feelings depending on their beliefs and their perceptions and the thoughts that they attach to this. So for example, if you take anxiety and excitement, on the physical level, it feels super similar actually when you tune in. And that's why it's so easy to switch it when you switch your mindset. And the interpretation is like at opposite ends, right? If you feel excited about something or if you feel anxious. And that's why when I'm nervous, I like to tell myself, no, you're just excited. And according to Paul Ekman, who was or is, I think he's alive still, I'm not sure, a psychologist who's famous for his research on nonverbal communication, there are actually only 6 emotions. Only 6 emotions that we physically feel. But how many different types of feelings can you name? I found a page that said there's actually 27,000 feelings that you can make out of the 6 emotions. But they called them emotions, so I'm not super sure how much I trust the site, but that number feels realistic. So when we start creating these stories around our emotions, when we start dramatizing and escalating a situation like this, we actually create something like, that you can imagine like a dam around the emotional energy that not only prevents it from flowing, but we actually add additional volume and additional energy to it because of how we focus on it. because if you recall that quote, energy flows where focus goes. So if we focus on the drama, we increase the drama. And I'm sure you can recall a situation where this happened to you. Maybe someone did something that felt really wrong or said something that hurt you. Maybe, I know this never happens, but maybe your teenager disrespected you. And you just got really upset about it. Maybe called a friend or 10 to tell them about it. And maybe they were on your side and what's it called? They tooted your horn. I think something like that. They agreed with you on how impossible that person is or behaved and how wrong of them to treat you like this. And what happens there? That increases the energy of the emotion, right? You feel even more pushed, even though it feels righteous and all of that. But that energy, that emotion does not go away. It doesn't dissipate. Your focus is fully on it. And your thoughts will be on it kind of like a dog with a bone. And the extra tricky part in that is, like I said, these feelings are not even your truth, but they're simply your interpretation of the physical sensation. And that interpretation is informed by our beliefs and our experiences. So if someone else experienced the same emotions, they might have a completely different interpretation of it. And that's why Byron Katie's work, for example, is so powerful, because she too rises above that storytelling level. Okay, and a third option is to just let it out, to let it flow and simply feel it. And that to me is the best version of the three. But chances are that you don't just let it run its course, but you continue feeding it with thoughts. And then you don't camp in that valley, but you kind of build a house there. So if you choose to also act on the emotions, it may not always be welcomed by those around you, especially if you tend to erupt in anger or tears spring to your eyes and you openly show sadness. As I mentioned earlier in this video, people do get overwhelmed with that energy of openly expressed emotions. That is just, it can be very forceful, right? But there is another option, and that to me is the easiest, healthiest, and best. And that is to simply become present with the energy of the emotion, to let go of the thoughts and the stories, and to allow our bodies to handle it. Our own bodies are so intelligent and so capable. They really know how to do that and to process that energy, which will then unfold and flow again. And that's what we then call an integrated emotion or experience. Because if you remember from the beginning of this video, our bodies absolutely know what to do. We just need to stop resisting and interfering. And the crazy thing is, when you do this, when you allow the body to process the energy of the emotion, it will change into a higher vibration within 90 seconds. Maybe make it 2 to 3 minutes at the start when you start practicing this, but in principle, it just takes 90 seconds. And compare that with how long we can get stuck in anger or frustration or any of that, or when we accumulate it and push it to the side. And remember how you were upset about something the last time. That can ruin a whole day, can't it? Or when we allow ourselves to drown in the doom scrolling and creating horror scenarios of what is bound to happen to our planet and to humanity if we don't change. That can really become a life theme. But in the next video, I will show you that super simple process of how to integrate emotions in a healthy and sustainable way, possibly within 60 seconds. Yes, I'm challenging you. Possibly within 90 seconds. And you will discover that it just not only frees energy, but there is gold hidden within these uncomfortable emotions, and you will connect to that. But before I end this video and leave you kind of hanging like this, I want to share something I noticed actually only while creating these slides. And you may have noticed it before I did, but I unconsciously left the joy bubbles around this character, no matter which state she is in. Did you notice that? And that actually is a really important message that Devin and I also dive into deeply in our Joy podcast in the second episode. I believe the link to that is in the channel description. I have to check, but should be there. And the thing is, joy is an inherent part of our emotional keyboard. It's always accessible there, no matter where we're at. And we may feel like it's outside of us and unreachable when we're in especially dark times, but I know that it's always there. We can always connect to it. And to me, that's a very comforting thought. And if you want to experience it for yourself, we share a little somatic process in that episode that reconnects you to your inherent joy. And finally, I want to share that I truly love to hear from you, and to read your comments and receive that feedback is just so supportive, and it's making my start into this new endeavor, if you will, so much easier. So I thank each one of you who was brave enough to leave a comment. I know it's a hurdle sometimes, and who has subscribed or liked. And if you have questions, please ask. You may not be the only one who has that question. And also, if you have a topic you would like me to address, share that, please. Because, inspire me, give me impulses. And I will see what comes from that. See you next time.